This is the second tutorial that helps you to get started with NVivo 12. We will look at how to add information about your files using memos and annotations, and we will cover NVivo's basic search function. Memos allow you to record any information or ideas that link to your project. They can be about specific items like files or nodes, and you can then link your memo to the relevant item. But memos can also be about administrative tasks or, for example, your project progress. There is not one right way of working with memos. It's really up to you and your project. But a very commonly used memo type is what we can call focus group or interview observation memos. In these memos, people often write down information about participants, but also about the body language, and some also include information about the interview setting. But again, it depends on your research what you think you should record. In what follows, I will show you how to create and manage such observation memos. I will cover some other common memo types in tutorial 4 that I will upload soon. We are now in our focus group folder. This is where we ended the first tutorial. And to create a memo that is linked to this item, we just need to right-click on the item and click on Memo Link and then link to a new memo. And then we get this window. As you can see, I added a name and a brief description. We can edit this later so you don't have to overthink this here. I circulated the other tab, attribute values, in orange. This is really only relevant for file classifications, which I will cover in a separate video. So for now, we only type in name and description and can then click on OK. And this is the new memo. And as you can see, I wrote down a bit of text to give you some examples of what you might want to include in such an observation memo. You can obviously always go back to it and edit it later. I now went back to the focus groups folder, and we can see that there is now this little icon that I circulated in red that indicates that the item is now linked to a memo. To open your memo, you can either right-click on the item, then select Memo Link at Open Linked Memo, or when you are in the item, you can just right-click and then select Links, Memo Link, and Open Linked Memo. We are also able to find our newly created memo in the Memos folder, which is a subfolder of Notes. To change name or description of your memo, you just need to right-click on it and select Memo Properties. And then we are back here, and this works in exactly the same way as for files, which we saw in tutorial 1. When your list of memos gets longer and you start having different memo types, it might make sense to create different folders. And this just works as in the case of file folders, which I covered in tutorial 1. To create a folder, you just need to right-click on Memos and then select New Folder. As an example, I just create a new folder for our focus group observation, and I add a brief description and click OK. And here on the left, we can now see the new folder. To move the memo from our Memos folder to the newly created folder, we just need to click on it and then drag it into the new folder. And now our memo is in the focus group observation folder. If you want to open it, you just need to double click on it. You can also create your observation memo the other way around, meaning that you first create it and then link it to a file. The first option to do that is to just right-click in the memo folder. And don't worry if you later want to move it to another folder, you can always drag and drop it as I showed on the previous slides. The second option is just to right-click on the folder on the left and then select New Memo. And this will look already familiar to you. I just entered again a name and a description, and then we can click OK. And here is our new memo. It just looks like in the previous example. We can also see here that we have created it in the Memos folder. And also here I added a bit of text as an example. Now that we created our memo, we need a file to which we can link it. And for this example, I will use an interview transcript that I uploaded into the Files folder. And all we need to do is to right-click on the item and select Memo Link and then link to an existing memo. And then this window appears and you can see that there is only one memo listed in our Memos folder. If you wanted to get access to the subfolders, you just need to click on the little plus next to Memos. But for our example here, I just highlighted the one memo in the Memos folder and then we can click OK. I'm now back in the Files folder and we can see that there is again this little icon that indicates that there is now a memo linked to this item. And a final hint, when you are in a memo, you can open the linked item by clicking on Memo Link, which I circulated here in red. You can also add information about your files using annotations. More generally, annotations allow you to record your thoughts that link to a particular part of an item in NVivo. We focus here on files, but you can also annotate memos, for example. In my experience, most people use annotations for writing down information that links to interview or focus group transcripts. So, for example, they would write down where the recording stopped or was hard to understand, where maybe someone entered or left the conversation, but it is really up to you what you think you should write down. Some people also prefer not to use annotations, but rather add these notes into the transcript itself using brackets. But the downside of this is that you cannot easily see and search for annotations, and you can also not easily generate a list with all or some of your annotations quickly. But again, this might not be so relevant for your project. In what follows, I will show you how to create and manage annotations, and we are using our example focus group file, which was a Word document, but it works in exactly the same way for PDF documents, for example. I'm now in the example focus group and I highlighted the bit of the text to which I want to link an annotation. And then I either click on New Annotation in the top menu, or I right-click on the bit of the text that I highlighted and select New Annotation. And here you can now see the annotations window at the bottom. I wrote down 2 sentences as an example, but I can always come back to that later and edit the text if I want to. A second example, I highlight a sentence in the text, and then again I right click and then go to New Annotation, and I typed in a sentence here to give you another example of how your annotation might look like. When the annotations window is open, you will see that in the Document tab in the top menu, the box next to annotations is ticked. I now unticked annotations and the window disappeared, but you can see that the text linked to the annotation is still highlighted in blue. You can also get a list with all your annotations. For that, you need to go to the Annotations folder, which is a subfolder of notes. When you right-click on an annotation, you get different options, and if you select Open Document, it takes you back to this. You can, by the way, also get here by just double-clicking on the annotation on the list. When you right-click in your Annotations folder, you will also be given the option to export a list of your annotations. I will cover exporting files, documents, and so on in a later tutorial in more detail. But before we move on, I wanted to mention that NVivo also gives you the option to connect content through what is called See Also links. In my experience, these links are less useful than memos and annotations, and I therefore did not include them in this tutorial. But please let me know if you would like me to cover them in a future tutorial, and I'm also really interested to hear from people who work with See Also links and maybe find them very useful. To get to this Find Content window, all you need to do is have your item open, then press Ctrl and F. And looking a bit more closely, we can see that we can specify our search. The first option is to select is style, but I reckon that this is less interesting than the next option, because here you can select whether you want to search in the text only or in annotations or in text and annotation. And finally, you can pick in which part of the text you want to search, which is particularly useful if the item is very long and if you know in which part to search. There are some additional options which I have never used myself, but please share if you have any recommendations. For this example, I just search for the word community in the text and then click Find Next. I circulated the first result in red, it is highlighted in black, and if I then want to see the next time the word community appears, I just click on Find Next. And then we can see that it is just a bit further down, and if I want to find the third mention of community, I would need to click again Find Next. As a second example, I search in text and annotations for background. You might remember that we had an annotation about background noise. And our search result is indeed in the annotation. You can see that the text bit linked to the annotation is highlighted in black, and then the word in the annotation is highlighted in blue. And a final hack, if you click on this little arrow right next to the box into which you enter your search term, you will find a list with your previous search terms. Overall, I think we can say that the search function is useful for searching within an item, but it does not give you any quantitative results, and it does not allow you to search in multiple documents at the same time. You will probably not be surprised to hear that there are more advanced search tools in NVivo, and I will cover one of them in tutorial 8a. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what was particularly useful, and also if anything was missing. Check out my website to find the presentation slides. I also provide more material there that helps you to get started with NVivo 12.